A very good afternoon, my dear students. Today, here in this third class, we are going to discuss about the short summary of Milton's Paradise Lost, Book 1. In the earlier two classes, we have already discussed about the biography of John Milton. Then, in the other class, the discussions were held on the Restoration period, then the Puritan age, and all these things and the stuff have been beautifully discussed, and you all have comprehended the ideas behind writing the text of this Paradise Lost Book 1. And before going into the textual section of Paradise Lost Book 1, we need to have a short summary because it will help us to grasp the meaning of this entire text. And here, in this text, Milton introduces his subject, man's first disobedience against God and its sorrowful consequences. The first line here, Milton refers to the consequences as the fruit of disobedience, and this fruit is having the sense of pan here. You know what pan is. So this fruit of forbidden tree, and this is this forbidden tree of knowledge, which Adam and Eve will eat against God's commandment. This single act will bring death to the entire world, and it is again the initiations of suffering into the world. And when the suffering will go on, there will be one greater man who is obviously to some extent metonymy for Jesus Christ, who will come and restore the humanity to purity and obviously paradise. Milton here, from line number 1 to line number 26, which is known as invocation to the muse. Milton here invokes the muse but clarifies that this is a different muse from the inspirational goddess of ancient Greek poets called Daphne. He asks for the muse that inspired Moses to write Genesis. This muse is greater than the classical muses because Milton had the ample knowledge on classicism, and he had the experiences of touring the entire Europe. So from there he has gathered knowledge on classical classicism. Then later on we will find that whenever he is trying to write down this Paradise Lost, he is to some extent deviating from the entire concept of that classicism or that Renaissance attitudes. He is taking and remodeling it from his own sense. So there, this Milton hopes that this poem will achieve thing unattempted yet in prose or in rhyme. So we have to keep in mind that what Milton is trying to do is actually an adventure. Adventure in the sense he wants to surface all the written documents that have been done till death. That is, Bible has already been written, then all the old, starting from Old English literature till the Middle English, Chaucer, he is now trying to surface all those things by his activity in form of this Paradise Lost. So here, he associates his muse with the Holy Spirit, which is a part of the Trinity and a force of creation of this universe. He asks this divine inspiration that he might assert, quote unquote, assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men. After this prologue, Milton asks Muse to describe what first led Adam and Eve to their disobedience. He answers himself that they were deceived into the foul revolt by the infernal serpent, who is none other than, Satan. Satan in form of that infernal serpent. Satan was an angel who inspired or who actually aspired to overthrow God and started a civil war in heaven. God defeated Satan and all his rebel crew and then threw them out of heaven. They all fell through an abyss for 9 days and landed into the surface of hell, where they all lay stunned for 9 more days. From that place, the poem then focuses on Satan as he lies dazed in a lake of fire that is totally dark. Next to him, Beelzebub, known as the Satan's second in command. And Satan speaks to him, finally breaking the horrid silence. Satan laments that their current state, which is now really doleful, and he wants to describe how far they have fallen from their previous glorious state as angels. He admits that he has been defeated, but he doesn't forget his war against God, though he never calls God by that name. You will come to know about this later on when the text goes on. He claims that his heavenly essence cannot be killed, and as long as his life and will remains, Satan vows to keep fighting against the tyranny of heaven. Tyranny of heaven, quote unquote. And to that, Beelzebub, that is second to his comment, answers, saying that God, in whom also avoids the naming, he also avoids this name, seems to be omnipotent, and he had originally claimed, and he may have let the rebellious angels live just to that they suffer forever. Satan doesn't contradict this, but he remains resolved to evil do ill, that is, ever do ill, quote unquote, and try to prevent or pervert God's works into evil, especially when God, out of our evil, speaks to bring forth good, quote unquote. Satan then suggests they leave the burning lake and find shelter on a distant shore. Milton describes the terrible sight and appearance of Satan's body, which is like whale or a Greek titan floating on the waves. Slowly, Satan drags himself from the liquid fire, quote unquote. Beelzebub follows, and they spread their wings and fly over dry land. They are pleased that they can do this of their own strength and, quote unquote, not by the sufferance of that supernal power. As they fly, Satan laments the desolation of hell as compared to the glory of heaven. And he accepts that, quote unquote, the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. So he would no longer be satisfied in heaven anyway. He resolves to make the best of the situation and declares that it is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, quote unquote. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Beelzebub then suggests that Satan Satan should summon his armies, as they will answer their leader's voice. Satan takes off his terrible armor, and he calls all his legions to follow him on the land and take off the fight again. The rebel angels obey and pull themselves from the fiery lake despite their pain and shame. Milton says that all these angels have had their names erased in heaven, but they are later given new names by humans, and some will be worshipped as even the false gods. Among these, more prominent devils are Moloch, who later becomes a god acquiring the sacrifice of children. Then, in this way, the story moves on, and we see that they are still dressed in their war gear and have their banners raised, and they create an awesome spectacle as they from the ranks and lift their spears. Satan is encouraged by the sight of his glorious army, which is far more magnificent than any of the famous human armies of later wars. Satan feels a moment of remorse for causing the suffering of so many millions by leading them into rebellion. But then he is strengthened in his resolve. He addresses his legions and commits himself to continue his fight against God. His only question now is whether to go back to open war or use more deceitful tactics. He mentions that God had spoken of creating a new world, and that the devils might escape there and make a new home. As Satan's words, the rebel angels all draw their flaming sword and reaffirm their defiance against heaven. Then they fly to nearby hill and begin to dig into the earth, unearthing gold and other raw materials or minerals. They are urged by Mammon. Mammon is a vain devil who, even in heaven, kept his eyes always on the ground, admiring the golden pavement. Milton warns the readers about admiring the rich minerals of hell, as they are nothing but vanity. In that way, the story passes on. And with this, the supernatural powers, the devils construct a massive temple in short amounts of time. This temple is large and more magnificent than the pyramids of Egypt or any temple human ever built. Again, it has some political references that we will discuss later on. Initially, we are right now in the summary part. So later, the architect of this is obviously a devil who is called Merciva, who will become the Greek god, and it will be then he'll be thrown by Zeus from Olympus. The devil called the temple, these devils calling this temple Pandemonium, all demons in Greek. The devils can change in size and shape, so they shrink from giants into dwarfs, and then all the hundreds of thousands enter Pandemonium. They said they were then sitting on golden seats, and then they begin their debate. So in this way, we find that the Paradise Lost Book 1 ends up. And here again, we are ending our discussion, or later our means deliberation on the summary of Paradise Lost Book 1. And in the next class, we will discuss on the text, basically the first 26 lines, the invocation to the muse. So waiting for the next class. Thank you very much.